Hello fellow Planeswalkers, it's Scott, and we're back with another Wilds of Eldraine preview video, and we're coming to you on the official Caffeinated Gamers YouTube channel, and today we're going to look at the top 10 cards I think are going to have an impact on Standard during Wilds of Eldraine season, and really over the next several years of Standard. But before we get into the cards, remember to like and subscribe so you get further content like this throughout Wilds of Eldraine Standard season and beyond. First, we want to look at are honorable mentions / these would be probably in the top 10 on their own if we individually rank them. So these are the creature lands from the set, the restless lands that we got, and each of them is very powerful in and of itself, and certainly we can expect to see these in decks across the format, and because of that they're going to be a critical part of any mana base going forward as we go through Wilds of Eldraine season and beyond. Alright, so coming in at number 10 is Ego Drain. For a black mana, you get a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. If you don't control a fairy, exile a card from your hand. So Ego Drain requires you to have a fairy in play or to exile a card. Now, this is very reminiscent of Thoughtseize, which is a sorcery as well for 1 black mana, and target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card, and you lose 2 life. So the downside of Thoughtseize, which is highly played in Pioneer and in Modern, is that you lose the 2 life. But Ego Drain has a way of avoiding that, which I think is a nice ability if you're putting this in a fairies deck. And the fairies are definitely going to be a deck in Standard. And because of that, I think Ego Drain is going to be a really important card throughout Wilds of Eldraine Standard season and beyond. At number 9, we've got Mosswood Dreadnite. For 1 and a green mana, you get a human knight that's a 3/2 with trample. And when Mosswood Dreadnite dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. The adventure side says Dread Whisper. For 1 and a black mana, you get a sorcery, and you draw a card, and you lose a life. This is one of the... this is very much a Golgari card where we're kind of seeing reusing and rebirth stuff. So I think this is going to potentially push the current Golgari deck that's not quite good enough in Standard into a more of a playable position. But just generally, having a card that you can bring back from your graveyard consistently is a very powerful effect in any format, let alone Standard. And I think we're going to see this in a lot of decks in Standard because the ability to bring a card back for a very low cost is very important in Standard. Next, we've got at number 8, Elusive Otter. For a blue mana, you get an otter. That's a 1/1. It has prowess, and creatures with less power than Elusive Otter's power can't block it. It also has an adventure, Grows Bounty for X and a green mana. It's a sorcery. And distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So early in the game, you're going to be casting Elusive Otter for the creature side. But then late in the game, if you get an Elusive Otter, you're likely to cast Grove's Bounty to put counters on all of your creatures to hopefully help you swing for that last bit of damage to win the game. Now, I think this fits probably best in the Izzet shell, and I think you can splash a little bit of green mana in there or some cards that are going to make treasures, so that way when you want to, you can activate Grove's Bounty to get the advantage of those extra +1/+1 counters. Next, we've got Likeness Looter. For a blue and a black mana, you get a fairy shapeshifter. That's a 1/1 with flying. And it has 2 abilities. The first one is tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. And for X mana, not Likeness Looter becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability activate only as a sorcery. So I can see this not only in the fairies deck, but also probably in any of the Dimir decks, because what Likeness Looter is doing, in essence, is becoming another potential copy of Sheoldred. If you play your Sheoldred, it dies, then Likeness Looter, for that same 4 mana, can copy it and bring it right back onto the field. And that is a tremendously powerful ability in Standard right now to really make it difficult for your opponents to win games. So Likeness Looter, I think, finds its way into Dimir along with the Fairies deck. At number 6, we've got the Goose Mother for X and a green and a blue mana. You get a legendary creature. That's a bird Hydra. It's a 2/2 with flying. So before we even get into the X value for the card, it's a 2/2, which even if you're just casting it as a 2/2 with flying, that's decent value in Standard right now. Now, obviously, where we really want to get the Goose Mother is to use that X ability to put additional +1/+1 counters on it, because the Goose Mother enters the battlefield with X+1 counters on it, and when the Goose Mother enters the battlefield, create half X food tokens rounded up. So 1 mana is going to get you a food token, 3 mana will get you 2, 5 mana will get you 3, etc. And those food tokens then become 2 things for you. Either they're a source of life, or you can, whenever the Goose Mother attacks, you may sacrifice a food. If you do, draw a card. So those can also be card draw for you in the deck. And because of that, I think this is very reminiscent of Hydroid Crisis, which was a top-end finisher in control decks for a long time. And I would expect the Goose Mother to have a similar impact on Standard, because Hydroid Crisis at the beginning didn't kind of look like much, but then once we got into using it in Standard, then it was obvious that it was a really powerful card. And getting all the potential life from the food tokens and or cards is really helpful in any format. And Hydroid Crisis, while when you cast it, you got half the life and then half the cards for the X value, I think Mother Goose might actually be better, because it already is a 2/2. So early in the game, if you need to cast it, you can get the benefit quickly, and then obviously late in the game, it's a wonderful finisher for your deck. At number 5, we've got Talion's Messenger. For 2 and a blue mana, you get a Fairy Noble with flying. It's a 1/3, and whenever you attack with 1 or more fairies, draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target fairy you control. So Talion's Messenger is very reminiscent, to me at least, of Raffine. Now the one difference is Raffine does it for every attacking creature, and Talion's Messenger is only one time do you get the bonus of drawing the card. But on the other side of it, Raffine does not reward you with +1 counters if you are discarding lands. And many times that's going to be at least part of the cards you're going to be discarding are land cards. You're not getting all the value from Raffine you could in terms of +1/+1 counters. But with Talion's Messenger, every time you attack with 1 or more fairy, you get to draw that card, and you get that +1 counter when you discard the card. And it can be a land. And I think that in the fairies deck is going to really make Talion's Messenger a key card in the success of that deck. Coming in at number 4, we have Virtue of Loyalty. For 3 and 2 white mana, you get an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Untap those creatures. And then on the adventure side, it's Ardenvale's Fealty. For 1 and a white mana, you get an instant to create a 2/2 white creature knight token with vigilance. Big thing here with this is Ardenvale's Fealty is an instant. So you can cast this on your opponent's turn, so you're maybe holding up some mana for a counter spell, or possibly to use another spell that might slow down your opponent's game plan. And that simply may be casting Ardenvale's Fealty and putting it in front of something. And then you can trade with it, or hopefully have the advantage of being a 2/2. You can take out a 1/1, and that would have a significant potential impact on the overall game. But then once you get to 5 mana, you get to cast Virtue of Loyalty, and every single turn, basically making it to your end step, gives all of your creatures +1/+1, and they get vigilant. So you'll be able to attack on your turn and then block on your opponent's turn, because every time, every single creature you have can attack on your turn and then defend on yours. And that's an incredibly powerful ability in Standard, and can break up some very clogged board states because of that. Next, we've got at number 3, Virtue of Persistence. For 5 and 2 black mana, you get an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And it has a sorcery attached to it, Locthwain's Scorn. For 1 and a black mana, you get a sorcery. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. So early in the game, you're going to use Locthwain's Scorn to take out one of your opponent's creatures and gain some life. And then in the late game, you're going to be able to play Virtue of Persistence, and every single turn, you're going to get at your upkeep one of the creatures that's in the graveyard. And that is a incredibly powerful ability. Now, do I see somebody playing 4 of these in their deck? I don't, but I think playing 2 or 3 makes a lot of sense in the black decks that we have right now, because there's a lot of cards we would love to be able to get back from the graveyard. And that could be somebody in a discard deck where you're trying to get cards into the graveyard so you can reanimate them later, or any kind of deck that has a lot of creatures in it, and you know based on the format you're going to be losing creatures as you go, and this is a great way of getting all those back. And over a few turns, it's going to be very, very difficult for your opponent to win the game when you've got this in play. At number 2, we have Charming Scoundrel. For 1 and a red mana, you get a human rogue with haste, and it's a 1/1. And when Charming Scoundrel enters the battlefield, choose 1, discard a card, then draw a card, create a treasure token, or create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature you control. Charming Scoundrel is my number 2 card because of the flexibility of the card. You can draw a card and discard if that's what you need to do. You can create a treasure token if you need mana, or you can use that Wicked Roll token to put it on Charming Scoundrel or another creature and get the benefit of it. And because of that flexibility, I think Charming Scoundrel is going to go into the mono red deck with no problem. It could use another 2-drop to help it push its game plan, and because it has haste, many times you're going to be playing Kumano Faces Kakuzan on turn 1, and then playing this as a 2/2 or a 3/3 depending on the circumstances of the game. And that's just a powerful ability, and we've seen the power of the mono red deck, and this is just another thing that's going to help push that deck forward in Standard. And also, if we do get a rolls deck, this is a great card for that, because A, is going to create a roll for you every time you cast it, and that may be what that deck needs to be successful in Standard. Coming in at number 1, we have Beseech the Mirror. For 1 and 3 black mana, you get a sorcery with Bargain. Search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If this spell was Bargain, you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost if that spell's mana value is 4 or less. Put the exile card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way. So for 4 mana, as long as you can bargain, you can bring any 1, 2, 3, or 4 mana spell into play immediately. That could be a planeswalker, or that can be a creature. Now, obviously, in black, we know what the creature is going to be. That's going to be Sheoldred. So you can go search your library for Sheoldred, and as long as you can bargain, you put Sheoldred on the field immediately. And that might be actually the one thing that finally gets us to the place where Sheoldred does get banned in Standard. With Beseech the Mirror, you in essence have potentially up to 8 copies or access to 8 copies of Sheoldred throughout the course of a game. And we know the power of Sheoldred in Standard and how game-changing the card can be. And because of that, I think Besiege the Mirror is the best card from the Wilds of Eldraine. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed our top 10 list of cards that I think are going to have the most impact on Standard. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, so you get further Wilds of Eldraine content throughout the Wilds of Eldraine Standard season. And I will see you next time.